Ladies and gentlemen of Knucklehead Nation, welcome to the Fighters Rep Podcast, episode 77. I'm your host, the Fighters Rep Fez, and today we're going to be talking about nothing but boxing, but if we feel like talking about other sports, maybe we will. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel where you get the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God, from the mind of a promoter / attorney. So the first thing I wanted to get into with you guys is, we have heard, and it sounds like it has been confirmed, that Jake Paul will be fighting Anthony Joshua. I think that's a very odd, but of course a very interesting fight that I think a lot of people are going to want to tune into, because Jake Paul has, I think, done a fantastic job of making himself a very disliked figure in the sport of boxing. I think he sort of does it on purpose, potentially, to get people to tune in and watch, a la Floyd Mayweather. And I think, a lot of people are going to want to tune in and watch because they're going to want to see either somebody smash Jake Paul, or it's going to be fans of Jake Paul wanting to see him in action, see what he can do against an absolute behemoth in Anthony Joshua. I also want to talk about the future of Devin Haney, who's now the champ, or one of the champs, at welterweight, 147 pounds, after a pretty good performance against Brian Norman. And I say pretty good performance, in that he got the job done, he got the win, he got, Brian Norman, or dropped Brian Norman and got the better of him. And that's why it was a pretty good performance. But we'll talk about, why I think it left quite a bit to be desired, if I'm being honest. And finally, we'll talk about what's next for David Benavidez, who says he's going to move up and fight Zurdo Ramirez, right? Which I think is an interesting fight, but it also begs the question, what about Dimitri Bivol? What about unifying in your division, right? Against Bivol, who's the WBO, IBF, and WBA champ right now. All very interesting situations that we're going to get into. So let's start with Jake Paul versus Anthony Joshua. It's going down, and I've mentioned this before, but if it's your first time here, it's going down December 19th in the very wacky, wild city of Miami, Florida, which I'm very familiar with. I've been born and raised there. And it's live on Netflix. So, tons of people are going to tune into this fight. And I think a lot of casuals are going to tune into this fight. So I would really hope, I'm really hoping for, and I think this is the benefit of Jake Paul, right? Is he's going to bring in young, hungry athletes with him and hopefully get all these casuals tuning in to bring some light and some popularity to these young up-and-coming boxers. I think that's the benefit of these social media fighters, right? They're bringing eyeballs to the sport that otherwise wouldn't watch, and hopefully we can convert them as fans, and I would love to have some sort of metric that showed me how many of these social media boxing people that are following these social media celebrities are actually converting into actual boxing fans. But hey, at least the possibility is there. And I think that's the silver lining for these social media boxers. That being said, Jake Paul, and I've said this before, in my opinion, seems to have peaked, and I hope I'm wrong, but seems to have peaked in the Tommy Fury fight where he lost against a legitimate boxer that's not a heavyweight. Anthony Joshua, ladies and gentlemen of Knucklehead Nation, is a legitimate heavyweight, and in my opinion, a guy who's been written off prematurely, right? And I'm going to tell you guys exactly what I mean by that, right? Because prior to his loss versus Daniel Dubois, where he was stopped, right? A couple things I want to mention. First and foremost, Dubois was hurt in that fight. And Anthony Joshua was hurt at the beginning of that fight before Dubois was hurt. Being in that situation, I think Joshua got a little bit desperate, which is understandable. Once he returned the favor and hurt Dubois, it left himself open and vulnerable to an attack and got himself knocked out. Up until he got knocked out, though, it looked like Daniel Dubois might be knocked out. Listen, this is heavyweight, knuckleheads. This is heavyweight, and anybody can land a shot at heavyweight, just about anybody, and turn the tides of a fight. So I think it's a mistake to write Anthony Joshua off as if he's some sort of has-been when, yes, he got KO'd by Daniel Dubois, but he was very close to KOing Daniel Dubois himself, and perhaps had he not been caught in the early part of that fight, things would have been very different. I would say, right, that if Anthony Joshua and Daniel Dubois were to fight 10 times, this is my opinion. You guys can disagree with me if you want. I feel Anthony Joshua would win 9 times out of 10. If they were to have a rematch, I would put my money on Anthony Joshua. And I say that coming off a hell of a week, right, where I predicted that Riyadh season card. I was right about Devin Haney. I was right about David Benavidez, which was sort of a given. And I was right about Bam. I was right about Devin Haney. And I was in the minority there. So I feel like I know what I'm looking at here. And, I do think people are sleeping on Anthony Joshua. And if Jake Paul is sleeping on Anthony Joshua, he's going to be sleeping on the canvas at the end of that fight. So I want to say a little bit more about Anthony Joshua, right? So people wrote him off because of the KO to Daniel Dubois. I just gave you the circumstances where he could have easily won that fight. He could have ended the fight in a knockout. It really was a sort of shootout at points during the fight, although Dubois had the advantage because he struck first and landed hard first and kind of had Joshua on Queer Street for the majority of that fight, which ended in the 5th round. But before that, and I know he's not a big deal in boxing, but before that, Anthony Joshua knocked out Francis Ngannou in 2 rounds. And while that might not mean much to everybody, that's a guy who took Tyson Fury the distance. He beat Otto Wallin, I believe made him quit on his stool, right? Yeah, corner retirement in round 5. He knocked out Robert Helenius, another guy who took Tyson Fury the distance. And he had a very comfortable unanimous decision against Jermaine Franklin. Before those fights, he took Alexander Usyk, the heavyweight champion of the world, the man right now, to a decision twice. In the second fight, it was actually a split decision. And before that, he KO'd Kubrat Pulev. My point is, right, I don't want to go back to Pulev. That's going back too far. My point is, Anthony Joshua, in those 4 fights before Daniel Dubois, was just looking better and better and better. And Robert Helenius, who he knocked out, is not a bad fighter. And Otto Wallin is especially not a bad fighter, right? And Francis Ngannou, while he's very green in the sport of boxing compared to a guy like Anthony Joshua, is a strong, durable guy that we've never seen anybody do that to. The closest I've even seen Ngannou to being hurt was when Stipe Miocic landed a big shot on him. I believe it was in their second fight. Buckled him a touch, maybe a little bit. And then Stipe rushed in for the win, for the finish, and got absolutely starched. So Anthony Joshua, man, I'm very highly doubtful that Anthony Joshua is even in the twilight of his career, if I'm being honest with you guys. He's a 36-year-old heavyweight with an 82-inch reach, 6'6", and he's got everything on Anthony Joshua, or on Jake Paul rather, and he might not even be in the twilight of his career. I mean, this guy was, in my opinion, in the middle of a resurgence. So we're going to put him in there against a YouTuber, Jake Paul. Well, I know it's worth the money. It's a lot of money. Shout out to Jake Paul. Shout out to Anthony Joshua. That's a lot of money. But my goodness, are you putting your health at risk, Jake Paul, fighting a guy like this? Because this guy, this guy can hurt you permanently. This guy can harm you seriously in the ring, Anthony Joshua. If he did that to Francis Ngannou, imagine what he can do to Jake Paul, a much smaller, I would imagine, much less durable man. So it's a scary fight. And I think that potentially scary outcome, right? I called it before. I analogized it to a man standing on a train track while the train is coming. That potentially scary outcome is going to get a lot of people to tune in. People wanting to see Jake Paul get his mouth shut is going to get a lot of people to tune in. And I think it's going to get a lot of attention and make a lot of money. But this could be Jake Paul cashing out right now, whether he likes it or not. That's the kind of danger he's facing in this fight. And I hope he really understands that. I think regardless, as long as you got a good referee in there to jump in there and stop it when it needs to be stopped, I think Jake Paul will be okay still, making tons of money on YouTube and making tons of money, as a promoter and as a fighter. But I don't know. This fight scares me. I'll be honest with you guys. So that's my take on that. Before we continue, subscribe, join the channel, help me grow Knucklehead Nation, get your Fighters Rep merch in the link below. But I especially ask that you guys join the channel. It's just $9.99 a month. You help me continue to grow. And I'm going to be dropping daily content for you guys. We're going to be talking about everything to do with boxing. Other sports as well. We'll touch on other sports, as we continue to grow. But definitely subscribe, join it. We'll continue to talk about the sport of boxing first and foremost, because that's what we love here. We're just a bunch of meatheads coming together to watch people beat the crap out of each other. So on to the next, I want to talk about Devin Haney, right? Devin Haney put on a heck of a performance against Brian Norman. And I mean heck of a, what I mean when I say heck of a performance is it was a heck of a performance for Devin Haney. It was probably one of his most exciting performances, which is not saying much, since the Regis Prograis fight on December 9th of 2023. It's crazy that happened almost 2 years ago. In the Jose Ramirez fight, subsequent to the Ryan Garcia fight, where Haney, was clobbered pretty bad, but then, luckily it got overturned to a no contest when they found a failed drug test for Ryan Garcia. And I say lucky because, I don't condone PEDs, whether it's on accident or on purpose. Somebody's at an advantage there, and I don't think that's cool. But, the fight subsequent to that against Jose Ramirez, Devin Haney did not look good at all, in my opinion. I mean, he looked terrible. He was just running around, avoiding the punches, from Jose Ramirez, a guy who, in my opinion, is way past his best, a fantastic fighter and champion when he was in his prime, but a guy when, Devin Haney fought him was way past his best. And to see Devin Haney run for his life from Jose Ramirez was a scary sight, and it kind of reminded me again of Anthony Joshua. Subsequent to that first Andy Ruiz fight, I mean, I said to myself, is Anthony Joshua ever going to be the same? After the beating he took at the hands of Andy Ruiz in their rematch, he was extremely timid. And Devin Haney looked much worse, much more timid than that in his fight against Jose Ramirez. But I said in my prediction versus Brian Norman Jr. that if we get the best Devin Haney, which I was expecting, or a really good Devin Haney, if we get the one similar to the one that fought Regis Prograis, man, he's going to win this fight. and I predicted him to win this fight against Brian Norman. And he did return to form. It was a semi-return to form against Brian Norman. In that, in the first few rounds, he was aggressive. He dropped Norman. But you could see he's still very timid and tentative in that when Norman was rushing him, which was, a very, I will say Haney showed levels in this fight versus Norman. Norman's only strategy was to rush in, step forward, and throw 4 or 5 punches in these weird blitzes that he was doing. It was very karate-like. He was doing these blitzes, throwing punches, and he wasn't really doing anything outside of that. And every time he did that, Devin just held on to him. And the more he did it, the sooner Devin would hold on to him. And it was a very boring fight after that knockout, or that knockdown rather, in the second round. So, Devin Haney he had flashes of that Regis Prograis fight, right, where he dropped Regis. He did the same to Norman in the second round. He was being a little bit aggressive and opening up. But then he went back into his shell. And, it just proved to me that, not that I needed more proof, but it definitely confirmed that Devin Haney is not going to change his fighting style, right? This is his 33rd fight, his 33rd win. He's 27 years old, so he's still young. But I don't think it's in him to change this style. He's the kind of guy that is going to hit and not get hit. And if it means holding you, if it means running out of the way, if it means sliding out of the way, if it means doing a backflip out of the way, this guy's going to get the hell out the way not to get hit. He's not going to engage enough, really, to put himself at risk for better or for worse. And so it's going to depend on who he fights as to whether his fight is going to be exciting or not. Norman is a pressure guy that comes forward, and luckily he brought a little bit of excitement out of the fight. But Devin Haney went right back into his shell after that knockdown, and it was a boring fight after that. And most of his fights are boring. And this is sports entertainment, right? It really is. Boxing is sports entertainment. Fighting is sports entertainment. People are there to be entertained. They're not there to just enjoy, unfortunately or fortunately, whatever you think. They're not there to just enjoy the technique of boxing. If that were the case, Devin Haney would be, a huge, huge star, right? And he's got some notoriety for sure. But this kind of fighting style is not going to endear him to fight fans. And I think it's a little bit confusing, right? Because Devin Haney does have the skills, does have the power, whether we believe it or not, does have the athleticism. Devin Haney has got it all in order to be able to, not only hurt these guys, but to finish these fights, in my opinion. But he just will not engage. He's so conservative. And shout out to him. He wants to preserve that O. It means everything to him. But I do think he would be much better served and make a lot more money and have a much better career if he could find a way to step on the gas and show some killer instinct when these guys are hurt and get the job done and finish some of these guys when they're on their way out, right? So he's at 34 total fights now with 15 by KO. That's well under 50% KO ratio. That's not what people want to watch. So shout out to Devin Haney for getting the job done, but that's not what people want to watch, and that's going to affect who he gets to fight next. The current welterweight champions include Mario Barrios, Rolly Romero, and Lewis Crocker. These are all guys that Devin Haney, I think, can very handily and easily beat. And I think he can unify the division. But I do think he's going to be much better served at this point in his career. It's going to benefit him much more to go out there and try to finish these guys when he fights them, assuming he gets the opportunity to fight them, which he should, as the new WBO welterweight champion. As for Brian Norman is an exciting fighter, but he's very limited technically, right? He's tough, he's strong, he hits hard, he's got big power. He's a pressure fighter. He's got a very, Mexican style almost, right? He just doesn't go to the body that much, but he's got a very Mexican style. It's pressure, it's power with both hands. He's trying to get you out of there. Unfortunately, he's not that technically sound, which Devin Haney showed, right? His head movement isn't that great. His defense is not that great. And his offensive selection, it was very limited in that Devin Haney fight. All he could do, again, it just seemed to me that he was blitzing over and over again with hooks, just blitzing with hooks, trying to, hit Devin Haney with hooks. Once in a while, he'd come in with a jab and try to set up a hook, but not nearly enough. He wasn't doing nearly enough. He wasn't feinting enough. He wasn't going to the body enough. His head movement wasn't good enough. His feet weren't good enough for Devin Haney. So he's going to have to go back to the drawing board and really work on some stuff if he wants to get back to the top of the welterweight division. Now, I think he can, right? Because you've got Rolly Romero, Mario Barrios, and Lewis Crocker. These guys, are not world beaters by any means. He can beat these guys, But Devin Haney is not going to beat unless he goes back, because Devin Haney is an elite fighter, especially defensively, getting the heck out the way, getting out of Dodge. It should probably be sponsored by Dodge or by a different car company. They should say getting out of Dodge. But Devin Haney, his foot movement, his feet are too elite for a guy like Brian Norman Jr. And Norman Jr. is going to need to work on that if he wants to beat Devin Haney. That being said, I do think he could beat the other welterweights, and I definitely think Devin Haney could beat the other welterweights. And I think Devin Haney should consider unifying, because I think he could do that quite easily. But I do hope that now that he's bigger and stronger at welterweight, that he will try to at least finish these fights, that he'll try to at least go for broke. Not even go for broke. Just, these guys are hurt. Get them out of there, dude. Get them out of there and build some fans for, behind your knockouts, as opposed to just being, you being super obnoxious outside of the ring. I think he's incredibly obnoxious outside of the ring. I think that's why people dislike him, but he's obviously working on his craft very hard. He's very dedicated. These are things that could resonate with people if you're not obnoxious, and he's obnoxious because he goes in there and he tries to get in his opponent's face and he tries to act like the tough guy, this and that. And then he runs around for 12 rounds. I want to see more from Devin Haney. I'm tired of defending him. I defended him for the Ryan Garcia fight, rightfully so. I don't think an opponent who was found to have failed a drug test should get a win. I think if you do it clean, like Devin Haney did, you should be rewarded. But I can't defend him anymore, man. That bullshit that he pulled after dropping Norman in the second round, letting him off the hook, and doing it to Regis Prograis too. To heck with that, guys. I want to see Devin Haney go in there and knock someone out. Devin, you need to go in there and knock somebody out, bro. When you got them hurt like that, knock their ass out. These guys are not on your level, dude. These guys are not on your level. So anyway, that's over and done with. That's pretty much all I have to say about Devin Haney. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, join the channel, just $9.99. Help me continue to grow. Get your Fighters Rep merchandise in the link below. We're dropping, damn near everyday videos. And we go live on the Fighters Rep podcast every Monday, 7 p.m. Pacific. And we go live after all the big fights. Finally, I want to talk about David Benavidez. He's talking about moving up to light heavyweight, or rather to cruiserweight. He just won a title at WBC at light heavyweight. He's talking about moving up to cruiserweight to fight Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez, right? It's a fun fight, no doubt. But, and, especially because Ramirez has two, He has 2 belts. He's got the WBO, the WBA. He's a bigger name than Badu Jack, who's got the WBC. And he's a lot less dangerous than the IBF title holder, Jayo Pataya. So it's a very strategic, Canelo-esque, if I do say so myself, a very strategic Canelo-esque move up weight divisions for the sport of boxing, right? But I'm sure his reasoning is, well, I waited around for 3 years to fight Canelo, and if you can't beat him, join him. Now, my thing is, Dimitri Bivol is still lurking in the division you just won that WBC title in as the WBO, the IBF, and the WBA champion. That's Dimitri Bivol. And he is that guy. He beat Artur Beterbiev, which is crazy. And he did so convincingly. He beat Canelo Alvarez. You know, if there's anybody who belongs on that pound for pound list, top 3, top 5, whatever it is, Dimitri Bivol belongs on there. And so by moving up to fight Zurdo instead of going after Dimitri Bivol is not the best look for David Benavidez if people actually want to see him in the best fights and if he actually wants to be in the best fights. Because the best fight without a doubt is Dimitri Bivol versus David Benavidez. Now, Benavidez has spent years calling Canelo out for doing this sort of thing. And the quails or the chickens, not the quail, the chickens have come home to roost because now he's doing it. Is he ducking, or is this a business move, or what is this? Tell me what you guys think. I think if you're hungry, you want to fight the best, you fight Dimitri Bivol. That being said, your career as a boxer is short. You want to make as much money as possible while also achieving as many accolades as possible. So I'm not really mad at David Benavidez, right? Because I am an attorney / promoter or former promoter. And a move like this, it makes sense to me from a financial standpoint, right? And I always wanted to, especially as a promoter, I always wanted to see the fighters do well and win and hopefully make some money. Interestingly enough, I saw on social media today somebody talking about bring Fighters Rep back, the kickboxing promotion that I ran for 7 years. And, I stopped doing it because, it wasn't that it didn't make money. I mean, it made money. It's just money isn't everything. And combat sports, is a very difficult business. Being a promoter is a thankless job. And I'll give you guys an example, right? The reason I stopped, this is the reason I stopped. If I were to have 50 people sign up to fight, 30 people would pull out. And that's just not something I wanted to put my money on, whether these people were going to show up or not. So, that being said, I still did my best by the fighters. I did everything I could do for the fighters. I love to see them win. I love to see them succeed. I love a comeback story. I loved more than anything about being a promoter, being a promoter is building guys. I've got a fighter that was a Fighters Rep champ right now, killing it at LFA. Probably going to go to the UFC, I would imagine, pretty soon. Luis Francis Canelli. I built so many fighters. I did a hell of a job. But when the event depends on people showing up and doing what they're supposed to do, and it's not a team sport where one guy can get hurt and the team will still show up. If the one guy gets hurt, they're not going to show up. Or if the one guy decides to flake and pull out, they're not going to show up, which was the majority, I think, of the people that pulled out, flakes. When your business depends on guys like that in a community like that, you just can't do it. But that being said, I digress. this is a business move, in my opinion, from David Benavidez. He's trying to go out there, make some money, build more accolades, build his resume a bit more so that he can get paid a bit more in the future. Not a bad move. Serto's not a bad guy to go after. It's just more experience to get you ready for Dimitri Bivol if you're going to eventually take that fight. But don't call out Canelo going forward for doing this, and then you go ahead and do it. Don't call out Canelo. Now you can't. If you call out Canelo after this move, in my opinion, right, you're kind of being a hypocrite, And I love David Benavidez. I think he's a fantastic fighter. I think he's underrated, technically especially. I think he's underrated. I think he's a beast. I think he's got all kinds of attributes that make him an absolute problem to deal with. I think the only guy that could potentially deal with him is Dimitri Bivol, but I could see him beating Bivol too. But don't talk bad about Canelo if you're going to do the same thing, right? And this looks like the same thing. I'm assuming he's going to fight Zurdo, beat Zurdo, right? Which is what Bivol did. And then hopefully take on Bivol. If not, maybe he stays at cruiserweight. I don't know. I just think it's a scary proposition to move up in weight and then move down. Always scary. And I've always felt that way since Roy Jones. Knuckleheads, that is all I have for you guys this evening. I really appreciate you guys joining me. I hope you guys leave some comments in the comment section below. This shit ain't stopping, so I'm going to keep going, and I appreciate the people who do support me. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Join the channel to support me and help me continue to grow. This is not easy. I do have a full-time job. I have kids. I got everything going on, so your support means everything. Keeps me alive, keeps me going. Thank you for joining me. And I hope you guys subscribe and join and get you some merchandise below and let me know what your thoughts are on everything we talked about today. Have a great night.